Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's cover the safety and health movement's workers' compensation laws. The first workers' compensation acts were enacted in New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Montana, as well as for federal employees between 1898 and 1909. Unfortunately, these laws were struck down as unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court because they required compulsory participation of employers and violated the 14th Amendment requiring due process prior to depriving a person or entity of their property. In 1911, Wisconsin and New Jersey passed the first effective workers' compensation law. These laws were limited to the number of workers covered and provided limited benefits. The issue was again challenged in 1917 in the U.S. Supreme Court of New York Central Railway Company versus White. This ruling stated that the employer's due process rights were not impeded by workers' compensation. The requirement for workers to show that the company was at fault was removed, and removed the ability of the employer to deny compensation if the worker negligence contributed to injuries, and companies were now required to purchase insurance to cover medical costs associated with occupational injuries and illnesses suffered by workers, as well as partial replacement of workers' lost wages. Many advances in occupational safety and health were championed by professional organizations. The first of these being the Association of Iron and Steel Engineers, established by electrical and mechanical engineers for prominent iron and steel companies. Their goal was to produce a unified effort to advance the technical developments and production, processing, and applications of iron and steel. The Association of Iron and Steel Engineers consolidated with the Iron and Steel Society in 2004 to form the current Association of Iron and Steel Technologies. The Cooperative Safety Congress was a small group of industrial leaders in 1912 who came together to promote safety within the U.S. industry. This group established the following year the National Council of Industrial Safety, NCIS, and then changed its name to the National Safety Council in 1915. The NSC remains one of the leading safety organizations within the United States. Since the advent of the National Safety Council, a plethora of other organizations have been formed to address industrial technology and engineering awareness. These organizations, in consort with their industrial partners, identified two crucial truths. First, that there is a direct relationship between quality and safety. Next, they established that there's a correlation between off-the-job accidents and reduction in productivity. Therefore, the logical response was to train workers to observe safety not only on the job, but also during their off-duty activities. The 1960s saw a growth of safety regulation and workers' rights legislation, beginning with the McNamara-O'Hara Safety Contract Act in 1965. It required all government contractors and subcontractors to use government bargaining power to ensure fair wages for employees. They are required to pay workers wages and benefits comparable to the locality in which they were working, establishing the first prevailing wage. In 1966, the Metal and Non-Metallic Mine Safety Act set procedures for developing safety and health standards for mines to include metals and non-metallics. It established annual inspections with federal inspectors given the authority to issue notices of violation as well as withdrawal orders. Depending on the threat, these orders may be advisory or mandatory. The Act also expanded mining education and training programs. The Federal Coal Mine Safety Act of 1969, or the COLD Act, extended the 1952 Federal Coal Mine Safety Act to all underground coal mines. It mandated withdrawal orders in cases of repeated unwarrantable failures to comply with standards. As with the Metals and Non-Metallic Mine Safety Act, education and training programs were expanded. Key elements of the Coal Act include 4 annual inspections for all underground coal mines while giving miners the right to request a federal inspection. 2 annual inspections for all surface coal mines. Mandatory fines for all violations with criminal penalties for knowing and willfully violating regulations. It it discontinued the individual state enforcement plans under a federal umbrella, strengthened and created procedures for mandatory safety and health standards, as well as instituted a training grant program. This program was expanded to allow subcontractors to provide safety and health training for the mines. In 1970, the Occupational Safety and Health Act created the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and its sister federal organization, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH. The main separation between the two is OSHA is within the Department of Labor, while NIOSH is governed by the Center of Disease Controls. Additionally, OSHA was created to enforce regulations, while NIOSH conducts research and provides education. However, NIOSH does not have legislative power. In fact, one of the areas where the department disagrees is within hearing conservation. For example, OSHA permits 85 decibels per 16-hour day, while NIOSH recommends 85 decibels per 8-hour day. OSHA permits 105 decibels for 1 hour per day, while NIOSH recommends exposure of less than 5 minutes. This discrepancy is primarily due to NIOSH using a more protective 3 decibel exchange rate. In 1972, the Clean Water Act regulated quality standards for all safety waters, as well as governing discharge pollutants into the waters of the United States. The birth of the Clean Water Act was actually founded upon the 1948 Federal Water Pollution Act. The Clean Water Act sets wastewater standards for industry, making it unlawful to discharge any pollutant from pipes or man-made ditches. The Clean Water Act does not regulate individual homes connected to municipal systems, nor septic systems, or that do not have a surface discharge. Industrial, municipalities, and other facilities must obtain permits to regulate discharge. The Federal Mine and Safety and Health Act of 1977, also known as the Mine Act, was instrumental in sharply decreasing the mining fatalities. The Mine Act transferred mining enforcement from the Department of Interior to the Department of Labor and created the Mine Safety and Health Administration. This also created an independent federal Mine Safety and Health Review Commission. Key components of the Mine Act were strengthening and expanding rights for the miners, enhanced retaliation protection for miners executing their rights, mandatory miner training was established, and required mine rescue teams for all underground mines. At the genesis of these acts was a number of annual workplace fatalities of 14,000. This massive number of preventable tragedies motivated Congress to cast a wider net over regulation of industrial safety. The number of industrial deaths for 2018, excluding violence and other injuries by persons or animals, was 4,422, with nearly half of these fatalities due to transportation incidents. Additionally, 828 individuals were killed by workplace violence, which is now being addressed by safety organizations. The Superfund Amendment and Reauthorization Act amended the 1980 Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. The SARA program stressed permanent remedies and innovative technologies for hazardous waste site cleanup and required Superfund action to consider standards and requirements found in federal and state environmental laws and regulations. It also provided new enforcement authorities and settlement tools. It increased state involvement in the Superfund program, increased human health focus on problems of hazardous waste sites, encouraged greater citizen participation on site cleanup, and required the EPA to revise hazard ranking systems to accurately assess the risk to the environment and human health posed by uncontrolled hazardous waste sites. The 1987 Water Quality Act was the first major revision to the Clean Water Act and was enacted to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. The Act provided new authorities for both large and small segments of the regulated community. The greatest impact was the funding of a multi-billion-dollar construction grant for waste treatments, construction, and technology. The grants were to be overseen by the EPA. Additionally, the Act set new compliance deadlines to remedy inequities to factories due to delays of the EPA promulgating influence guidelines. Generally, these guidelines were extended to 3 years from the date of EPA issuing the guidelines. In 1990, the Clean Air Act of 1970 was amended to establish national regulation of air pollution. The act required the phase-out of ozone-depleting chemicals. It addressed acid rain, urban air pollution, and toxic air emissions. Required large industries to address and control their contributions to air pollution. Established a national permits program. Encouraged market-based principles such as performance-based standards in emissions bankings and trading, addressed cost-effective alternative clean fuels, promoted the use of low sulfur coals and natural gas, supported clean fuel derivatives from grains and natural gases to reduce dependencies on foreign fuel imports. The Clean Air Act resulted in the reduction of air pollutant emissions by 70% since 1970. Next, we move into total safety management, which was introduced with total quality safety framework to address industrial safety. The pillars of the total safety management are a commitment to safety, cost control, responsibility for maintaining a safe environment while fostering continuous improvements, joint problem solving, and customer orientation. Total safety management focuses on prevention of accidents that causes injuries, and it emphasizes strong top management commitment to safe practices, cost savings in lower insurance, lost production, compensation, and lawsuits, and management accountability for meeting OSHA guidelines, as well as establishing plans and strategies to achieve an accident-free workspace. The International Organization for Standardization, ISO, 14,000 sets the criteria for environmental management system. This is very similar to what we've seen before as far as ISO certifications in ISO 9001. In the ISO 14,000 family, the most notable standards are 14,001. Among these U.S. companies, Ford Motor Company began certifying all of its facilities to ISO 14,001 in 1996, completing registration in 1999. The standard in part provides for environmental systems requirements with guidance, focuses on audits, communications, labeling, and life cycle analysis, addresses environmental changes such as climate change through the International Organization for Standards. These organizations were adopted as the Occupational Health and Safety Assessment Series, OSHA 18001, and is now immigrated into ISO 45,001. ISO 45,001 addresses the more than 2.78 million occupational deaths and 374 million non-fatal injuries due to accidents and illnesses. It was developed with inputs from experts from more than 70 industrialized countries with an international framework. ISO 45,001 was designed to be integrated with existing management processes. It follows the same high-level structure as other ISO management, such as ISO 9001 quality management, ISO 14,001 environmental management. The objectives are reduction in workplace accidents, increased productivity by reducing absenteeism and staff turnover, reduced insurance premiums, creation of a health and safety culture throughout the organization, reinforcing leadership commitment to proactive improved occupational health and safety, meeting legal and regulatory requirements, and improving staff morale and enhanced reputation. OSHA certification OH SAS 18001 must be migrated to ISO 45001 by March 2021 to retain certification. Moving on to what we are looking at in modern safety movement, one of the biggest concerns we're seeing since 2003 is the awareness of workplace terrorism. This has become quite an issue, and many of you are probably too young to remember the post office shooting August 20th, 1986 in Edmond, Oklahoma. The incident involved a part-time letter carrier facing possible dismissal, walking into the building where he worked and shooting 14 people to death prior to turning the gun on himself. This shooting, along with a prior post office shooting, coined the dark term going postal, which indicates someone who is about to go nuts or off the deep end. Ralph Brennan, in the Effective Security Officers Training Manual, stated that workplace violence is now recognized as a specific category that calls for distinct responses from employers, law enforcement, and the community. This recognition has been developed over the past 25 years. The FBI has also observed that mass murder on the job by disgruntled employees are media-intensive events. However, these mass murders, while serious, are relatively infrequent. It is the threats, harassment, bullying, domestic violence, stalking, and emotional abuse, intimidation, and other forms of behavior and physical violence that, if left unchecked, may result in more serious violent behavior. There are behaviors that supervisors and managers have to be dealt with every day. Although many have stated the glamorization of these shootings creates copycats, it appears just as likely that an increased ability to document these events means we not only have discovered the trend that has always existed. In any event, part of your safety plan should be developed within the company's security team to best respond to workplace violence. Another trend that we're starting to see is the aging of the workforce. Many boomers have difficulty in retiring due to various reasons. Although commonly it's stated they do not have the funds to do a retirement, more often than not, many of these people just find the need to work. Over the next 20 years, many organizations will experience significant shortages of trained workers. They will be unable to address shortages. Companies will seek alternatives of skilled labor. One way to meet this demand is by retaining and engaging older workers. Between 2020 and 2030, the worldwide labor force imbalance will create a significant labor force depletion. An expected annual growth rate of 0.5% of the labor force for those ages 16 to 54, and projecting industry to grow at 0.6% during the same period. The annual growth rate is projected to be 2.6% for those 55 and older in the workforce. According to the latest census, there will be a 67% increase in the older population by 2040, at which 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 or older. Currently, 25% of the workforce is 55 years or older, with 35% of the labor force being above age 50. According to the United Nations in 2015, the belief that we can import our workforce is errant, as the world's workforce is aging as well, sometimes even more so in Asian, Latin American, and African nations. Many studies of the aging population within industry consider the hazards and medical issues, yet have failed to provide solutions. They've noted aging attributes such as work experience, expertise, wisdom, and strategic thinking accumulate with age. Older workers also tend to be more committed to the job, reliable, and loyal while staying longer. Older workers may display a reduction in physiological performance. After the age of 25, endurance and aerobic capacity is decreased, and even more so after the age of 40. The potential decline of overall confirmed performance might affect any type of work or task. Physical flexibility will decrease between the ages of 30 and 70. Repositioning objects as well as operating controls, displays are valuable measures to minimize prolonged flexing, bending, twisting, and stooping. The adjustment of the overall workspace regarding changing physical requirements of the aging will improve performance in all age groups. Although being thin-skinned was seen as a pejorative, in reality, thin skin does become thinner and drier as we age. Changes in the tolerance to heat and cold can be controlled by skin protection and protective clothing, as well as many breaks and limited work in extreme hot or cold conditions. Physically demanding exposures such as walking, lifting, put stress on cardiovascular and muscular systems, as well as generally becoming weaker as we age. Additionally, extended sitting is another major risk factor, as older workers are more susceptible to thrombosis. Work organizations, poor management, lack of freedom, and restless work environment are factors that have negative influence on workability in all age groups. Long working hours, reduced productivity of older workers, increase their absentee rate, and enhance the probability of losing their jobs or encouraging them to leave the labor market earlier. As age-sensitive risk assessments should take into account the workforce diversity, and older worker benefits and vulnerabilities should be included in any type of company. Applying an age-sensitive risk assessment and adopting measures to protect employees will raise safety and standards and minimize the risk of occupational accidents and diseases. The main elements of age management are recruiting process, which focuses on skill and experience while avoiding age discrimination, knowledge transfer, training, and lifelong learning, workplace health promotion, career development, flexible working times, occupational safety and health management, job rotation, and employee exit and transition to retirement. In the 20th century, in the earliest 20th century, mining companies would attract workers by building company towns for housing, medical care, stores, schools, restaurants, bars were provided for employees and their families. If you've ever heard the song 16 Tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford, you will notice that the big part of that was he cannot afford to die because he owes his soul to the company's store. The company towns within history and U.S. corporations were still a concern when you're looking. They concerned everything. So off-duty aspect of the workers' lives were tied to the company. Due to a competitive marketplace, the company towns tended to disappear. Okay. Now the company itself has become more involved in the local community and society as a whole. In 2010, organizations began to concern themselves with off-the-job safety as a critical part of their overall safety and health plan. Healthy employees were more productive the more progressive industries realized, and for too long had ignored providing better quality of life and simple medical care. Although the benefits have become quite extensive, we'll focus primarily on those that are directly related to safety. This is not to say the other factors are not important, as they tend to reduce stress, but each company must treat safety and health risk off the job. The most complicated among the companies are individuals who work from home. Precautions should be taken at the organization to observe that the home office has even more hazards than you may have seen in a regular office, primarily because the employee will be working alone. Slipping on stairs, being trapped under a tipped-over file cabinet, receiving lacerations while attempting to clear a paper shredder take on a higher level of hazard and possibility of fatality when someone else is not around to observe the accident. An additional topic has been to train workers in being alert to the possibility of violent crimes. Precautions should include increasing awareness to include not only by not dulling your senses with alcohol, drugs, traveling with others to reduce targeting by criminals, and using well-traveled, well-lit pathways and keeping your head up. Okay? Do not flaunt your valuables, especially at ATMs. Maintain distances from doorways, bushes, and parked cars, as someone may be hiding behind those. If leaving work late at night, particularly after dark, many companies suggest using their security to escort employees to their vehicles and assist them in checking the vehicle is secure. As previously noted, during the 1800s through the 1900s, employers operated with little concern to safety and health. Laborers were little more than a cog in the machine. They were easily replaced, and existing laws made it easy to ignore the threats to the workers. Okay. Between World War I and World War II, industry discovered that there was a connection between safety and quality, as we mentioned with Taylor previously. Also during this time, a lot of the labor force was lost due to the conflict, and labor became more valuable. Employers could no longer afford to lose workers due to accidents or negligence. World War II also led to a discovery between the quality and safety. So we no longer could look at loss of limb or even loss of one's life to be shifting the blame to the worker instead of being laying at the employer's feet. Workers were necessary for the company's economic survival, and now the employer was at the mercy of the employee. Therefore, if worker left for safety reasons, they can no longer be ostracized as unreliable or a rabble rouser, and should have no problem finding another position. As previously stated, in the 1800s, employers had little concern for safety. Workers, just another asset, easily replaced by another unemployed willing labor resource. When labor resources became scarce, businesses began to consider protecting labor they currently employed. Perhaps the most important contributions of organized labor to the safety movement was their work to overturn anti-labor laws related to safety in the workplace. They fought against the ruthless acts of businesses not providing compensation for injured workers. From management's perspective, it's easier to simply replace the worker without addressing the solution, which led to injury or death. Among the most important achievements for the labor organizations was overturning the fellow servant law. This rule held that employers were not liable for workplace injuries resulting from the negligence of other employees. The law started to weaken with the advent of workers' compensation laws in 1911, but the loopholes were still allowed for use in a 1989 case of Palmer versus Schoolman in the Seventh Circuit Court. Carl Palmer argued against his employer for negligence in a combine operator, James Keene. Palmer had stepped into the combine's corn head, which is, for those of you unaware, it's chains and shears, various sharp blades used to pick and shuck the corn. Okay? And this resulted in the mangling and loss of both of Palmer's legs. The judge admonished the state of Illinois for failing to plug the anachronistic and cruel gap in the state laws for industrial accidents. Next, contributory negligence was addressed, which absolved an employer if the actions of employees were fully or partially contributed to their own injuries. In recent years, this consideration has been replaced with a comparative negligence test. Comparative negligence recognizes the fact that a plaintiff has some culpability in the accident and assigns a relative percentage of negligence by the parties in order to determine the amount of damages that should be awarded to the injured party. Contributory negligence is still available in civil lawsuits, but may not be used where the defendant acted maliciously with intentional wrongdoing. So no pushing somebody into the machinery. Assumption of risk was based on the theory that people who assume a job assume the risks that go with it. Its defense was weakened by the 1908 Employers' Liability Act and was negated by many state workers' compensation laws. This defense was abolished in recognition of the severe economic pressures with threatened loss of employment exerted upon workers. I'll just let you read that without comment. So how do we develop a accident prevention program? And of course, we'll get more into this as we go along, so we'll just get a real good overview of it right now. Okay. First of all, we want increased liability and there's greater responsibility inside the workers' industry. We need to realize preventing accidents provides greater profit. There's a better return of investment. The first consideration is to improve engineering will reduce accidents. This is always the best thing. Engineer out the problem. Prevent it from even existing. Next, we have a finding that employees are willing to learn and accept established safety rules. Okay. Those are the people we want. We need to make sure for those that are tending to kind of skirt the rules that there will be enforcements and penalties against ignoring safety. So find the employees willing to learn and accept the rules that exist. Finally, we'll look at the financial savings that will be reaped from not having to pay medical and compensation bills. Okay. So this understanding led to, first, as I say, we'll go with engineering. Objective, improve the process and the product. The thinking is simpler the product, easier to manufacture, fewer opportunities for injury during the process. Okay. Following that, education. Teach the workers how to work safely. Tell them why safety is important. Get them to do safe practices and tell them that safe practices are expected by management. Safety education will cover the what, where, when, why, and how of the process with respect to safety. Also, it has a byproduct of getting people to think of safety off the job. And finally, we'll go with administrative, such as enforcement. Okay? Enforcement says that the safety programs will be observed by making sure the employee will observe safety policies, rules, regulations, practices, and procedures. Both supervisors and fellow employees are tasked with ensuring all workers are following safety protocol. So where have we come? Okay. Well, we've got a lot of safety and health organizations out there, numerous organizations, as it says, devoted to workplace safety and health. Safety has become a major driver in modern industry, as can be seen with the number of organizations we have here. The grandfather of these organizations we covered earlier, which was the National Safety Council, established in 1913. The funny thing about this one, it was a very small office, one man in one office at the time it was established. It's grown much larger since then. The NSC is the largest safety organization in the United States, as I mentioned earlier. Its purpose is to prevent loss, both direct and indirect, arising from accidents or forms of exposure to an unhealthy environment. The NSC is a not-for-profit public organization. Next, we have the development of safety organizations. A lot of these are agencies working with the government or associated with the government for overseeing safety in American industry. The American Public Health Association, although not a government agency, it is a professional organization for public health founded in 1872, so it's been around quite a while. The Commerce Clearinghouse is a software group that provides information for taxing, counting, and audit workers. It was initially founded in 1913 as a company publishing U.S. tax laws and tax compliant with the birth of the federal income tax. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration is the government's arm of administration and enforcement for Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. You will all become very well acquainted with OSHA as we go through here. Okay. OSHA sets and revokes safety and health standards. It conducts inspections, investigates problems. It will issue citations and assess penalties for violations of safety and health standards. It will petition courts to act against unsafe employers. It will provide safety training and injury prevention consultation, and maintains a database of health and safety statistics. OSHA enforces and integrative approach requires companies to have a plan for the following. They must have medical treatment for injured workers as well as those suffering illnesses. They will be regularly examining workers exposed to toxic substances and must have at all times a qualified first aid person. So if you have a 8 to 5 and then you close the doors, someone needs to be there for first aid. This includes if they're working overtime. If you're running 3 shifts doing 24 hours, a first aid person must be available on all those shifts. Okay? And we will cover OSHA more when we get into Chapter 6. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, is part of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Okay? The Department of Health, and that falls under the Department of Health and Human Services. They're primarily tasked with research and training. They annually publish a comprehensive list of all known toxic substances. They provide on-site test substances so the companies know what they're handling and what precautions to take. They provide education. However, they still have no legal authority with respect to penalties. However, do not think that they won't turn to their sister organization in OSHA to take a look at what is going on. As previously stated and repetitively stated, 1800s employers had little concern for safety. You're just another asset, easily replaced. Modern companies, though, have a more integrated approach to safety and health issues. Knowledge is shared with respect to health risks, particularly among those handling toxic substances. Companies seek to improve expertise in evaluating health and safety. Companies develop an expansive database on safety and health problems observed internally, as well as findings among other companies in the similar industries. And companies are encouraged with accident prevention while prioritizing employee safety and health. Large companies tend to staff the following health and safety positions. The smaller companies may have to contract these out to fulfill the requirements. The first of these is the industrial hygiene chemist or engineer. Companies that use toxic substances and employ industrial hygiene chemists to periodically test the work area and employees who work in that environment. These chemists provide early identification of an unsafe condition or harmful levels of exposure to toxins. They may initiate preventative or corrective measures and address ventilation, vapor, or dust levels, as well as housekeeping procedures. These individuals also tend to address factory noise levels. Radiation control specialists are employed by companies that use or produce radioactive materials or substances. Typically, a physicist or electrical engineer, they're tasked with monitoring radiation levels and workers' exposure. They may also develop company-wide plans for responding to radiation accidents, as well as implementing decontamination procedures and addressing radioactive injuries. Industrial safety engineers or managers are safety and health generalists with specialty training. They are tasked with developing and implementing the company's overall safety and health program to include accident prevention and investigation, as well as overseeing safety and health training and education. Depending on the size of the company, you may have half a dozen of these or more, or some companies may have a single industrial safety manager with dual-headed to some other project. Other positions we may see include occupational physicians or nurses, psychologists and counselors, as well as educators. So all these individuals are needed in modern industry. Current engineering procedures include failure minimization and fail-safe designs. Failure minimization is the concept of reducing consequences of failure by using engineering principles of monitoring devices, warning devices, safety margins and factors, and failure rate reduction. Fail-safe is returning a mechanism or machine to its safe condition in the event of a malfunction or breakdown. This would be optimally effective if the device will return to a normal operating range once it senses it is beginning to exceed its tolerances. Another engineering solution is isolation. Isolation of dangerous equipment may take the form of caging the machinery or placing it even in its own room. Lockouts occur when the equipment is removed from service for maintenance or troubleshooting. We'll cover that a little bit more in depth later on. The equipment and the associated power is literally locked out using physical locks and strictly controlled keys. Typically, the person doing the maintenance holds a key and only the supervisor holds the other key of locked out equipment. Obviously, the supervisor holds the secondary key in the event something happens to the technician and we need to set the situation correct. Screening also involves surrounding hazardous areas with markings, ropes, chains, and making sure that we have electronic sensors to disable the machinery when the screened area is breached. Most of the accidents that have been involved with robots were due to the fact people somehow violated the screening mechanisms. One of the most common things we're seeing now as far as screening is light curtains, where you have sensors such as lasers that are marking a particular area, and if somebody breaks that light curtain, then the whole machinery will shut down. Think of it as your garage door. If you break the contact on the garage door, it'll stop where it's at or go back up. Next thing we'll look at is the personal protective equipment. This includes anything worn by an individual for personal safety. This includes clothing, helmets, safety shoes or boots, masks, respirators, and breathing apparatuses. As we're going through COVID-19 right now in 2020, many of you are well familiar with the mask and breathing apparatus. We also need to look at eye protection and hearing protection. Eye protection for anybody who's doing the electronics labs, you're very familiar with those as well. Finally, we'll look at administrative procedures. Basically, when you're looking at this, we want to have redundancy in administration. So we have backup equipment or product lines to swiftly switch our method of production in the event of a breakdown or an unsafe condition on the primary line. The great thing about this is it prevents people from thinking, well, we got to operate with an unsafe condition on this line because there's no other way to do it. If you have a backup, you can quickly shift to the backup line while we fix the other line. Okay, time replacement. We plan to replace the equipment as it reaches its end of service life. Some instances, the companies rebuild the equipment that has been replaced, set it over to the side, and then as the one they had before reaches its end of service life, they can pick that one up and then put the rebuild one in place. This saves them a lot of money. Administrative controls would be any actions that would reduce the safety hazard by making changes to the behavior of the individual, making changes to the way we produce the product, reforming the way we do that. Administrative controls include training procedures, policies, modifying shifts even, and among the rankings, as we said before, engineering procedures followed by administrative controls and then personal protective equipment is the best way to do it. So engineering, then administrative, finally the personal protective equipment. You don't want to actually have people need to use personal protective equipment because that means a hazard exists. Just as we've seen before, introduction machines at the advent of the Industrial Revolution is being duplicated today with the introduction of fast-paced automation, smart systems, exotic materials are coming along, and robots being introduced challenges to safety and health managers. Many of the processes are adding complexity, require special handling. A greater range of metals are being forged and handled in powdered form. Additionally, plastics, ceramics, composite materials present their own unique hazards. High temperatures during forging, escape of metallic particulates during milling, release of toxic vapors during production of plastics such as ceramics. Modern factory can be filled with overlaying processes requiring industry, robots, lasers, welders, photochemical machinery, ultrasonic and water jet milling directed by computer-aided manufacturing. And it looks like I got a little bit ahead of myself here. One of the up-and-coming stars is the use of 3D printing using filament ranging from polymers, particularly plastics, to metals, ceramics. Construction even has 3D printers now that use basically cement to build houses with. Automation is becoming more rapid, and as it becomes more rapid, it introduces more hazard. Increasing the speed is facilitated by robots. This little guy I have on the machine to the right, or on the slide to the right here, is a machine that is able to work with people. It has sensors that can detect when somebody is around it. The little face actually moves to let you know which way it's looking at the time. It could be trained. Very advanced, unfortunately became too advanced for its time, and people were not buying it. So the company itself unfortunately went out of business. One of the hazards you need to be concerned with robotics is the fact that a 5-ton robotic arm is capable of lifting that much weight and swinging that through a 40-foot work area in under a second. Unfortunately, you're not able to move out of its way, particularly if you're not looking at it. That's why they're usually put inside cages or rooms all by themselves, as well as interrupts if you try to break in, go into that area. For areas where you still need intelligent robots working, this is where we have our little guy here. And even though this company went out of business, more of the companies are actually understanding they need to have sensors so the robots realize when somebody is in the way. So as we have an increase in automation, more legislation is coming along to address the hazards of safety and health. Engineers, managers need to be more vigilant to address the new challenges within the workplace. Safety engineers and managers need to realize the complexity within the workplace that have resulted, and make sure they continue to train personnel as they come along. Your degree program requires this course more than likely, and many colleges are now actually offering degrees in occupational safety and health. Businesses will focus on the bottom line. That's just reality. Profit is the goal and the lifeblood that keeps any company running. It determines who gets pay raises, bonuses can be dispensed, and how much we can afford to pay to retain experienced personnel, and what funds are available to recruit new personnel. Managers are constantly under pressure to justify expenditures within each department, section, and shop. They must not only address their needs, but be able to defend associated costs for a return on investment. It's not unusual to see cuts to training, which is an integral part of safety management, when considering the budget. Therefore, safety managers need to be able to relate how safety procedures and training improves manufacturing efficiency and cuts costs. Safety managers, when addressing return on investment, need to demonstrate the relation between safety and productivity. The Fowler-Wheeler study demonstrated there's a 63% correlation between safety and productivity, as well as revealed cutting workers' injuries in half increased productivity by 10%. Need to address positive public image regarding safety and how that improves public confidence. We're in a very socially aware environment now. A company that takes safety seriously is going to see that reflected as producing a safer product. Okay. The safety programs reduce disasters and associated medical expenses, paid time off, and litigation. In 2018, serious non-fatal injuries cost manufacturing $146.54 million a week. Not a year, a week. The construction industry experienced $189.81 million per week in serious non-fatal injuries. Additionally, observing safe practices such as preventive maintenance increases the life of the equipment and decreases the likelihood of a catastrophic breakdown. And we will reinforce this theme throughout the course. As far as catastrophic breakdown, we don't want another flywheel coming out and destroying our personnel. We need the workers to continue to produce. So that will be the end of the first lecture. I have included at the end, and you can get the PowerPoints online, all of the references. There's quite a bit here if you want to read more into any of these incidences or regulations we may have. I would not suggest trying to pick up the OSHA manual and look at that. Otherwise, I don't think you'll make it through the semester. But quite a bit what we've got in the references here. Many of you are probably wondering, okay, how much of this am I going to have to worry about? Mainly I will look at your text and my notes. Okay. When you want to take a look at the PowerPoints, just print off the note pages. You should be able to print that on any printer, or you can just view it online. And that's where all of the questions for both quizzes and the exam will come from. My quizzes will not exceed 20 questions usually. Exams I tend to put around 100, and as far as the quizzes are concerned, they may not get anywhere near to 20 questions, so we'll just play that one by ear. You should be able to find all the information in our class website. If you have any questions, you can contact me at my email. Give me a little while to get back to you. I do have other classes this semester, so a pretty full schedule, but I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. The next lecture we will be coming up with is on accidents, and as I stated before, look over the lectures, look over the PowerPoints. If you have any questions, bring them to me. Look at your quizzes, and there will also be papers assigned, reports necessary. Your seniors and graduate students we're working with here, I expect your reports to be in APA style. I have guidance for that online, so just go to the class website. You'll see what I'm expecting, and everything will be addressed there. I'm primarily looking for your content, but as professionals, you should be able to address proper reports at this time. Very well, that concludes this lecture. Have a good day.